Welcome to the Manning Up on Real Estate podcast. This is the podcast where we will have real talk on what is happening in the local market of Greater Vancouver. Here we'll discuss the news, strategies, and interviews to help you man up on your real estate career. I'm your host, Cameron Manning. All right, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to another episode of the Corona Chronicles here on the Manning Up on Real Estate podcast. I'm your host, Cameron Manning, and I'd like to thank you all for joining me again here today. We've got another exciting interviewee here who's going to be joining us on the podcast. So I'm going to dive right into it and introduce you to Melanie Robinson. Melanie, welcome to the podcast.
Hey, Cameron. Thank you so much for having me. Super happy to be here.
I'm excited to have you here. In fact, I think this is maybe your first podcast that you're doing now, or?
It is my first podcast. Yeah.
Excellent. Well, I'm glad that I get the exclusive and kind of, break you in for the podcast world here. So, well, Melanie and I, for those who don't know, we've known each other for a number of years now. I still remember the day I met Melanie, and I hope you're okay with me sharing the story, but I'm going to do it anyways.
I don't know yet.
We were out at a rain event a number of years ago, and I still remember the day when I'm sitting there talking to a colleague of mine, and all of a sudden this person just randomly shows up in the group, like the little circle, and says, "Hi, don't mind me. I'm Melanie. Nice to meet you guys. I'm just going to listen." And that was my introduction to Melanie. I thought it was the best thing ever because what it showed to me was that she's a go-getter. She's willing to put herself into these uncomfortable situations and just kind of like she's willing to learn, right? So I remember we exchanged contacts at that point, and I mean the rest has been history. But maybe we'll dive a little bit into that history a little bit to get to know you a little better, and then really what I want to talk about as we dive further in is what you're kind of known for, and that's mind power stuff, right? You do a lot of work in NLP and different things like that, correct?
That is correct. Yes. So I've been sharing that a lot with the real estate investing community lately, and absolutely loving sharing that aspect of helping people create their success. So.
Excellent. Now, maybe before we get into the real estate side of things, maybe tell us a little bit about what you were doing before real estate. And I know that kind of led you into this mind power stuff as well. So tell us a little bit about your career leading up to getting into real estate.
Okay. So we have a family business that does training, coaching, and consulting. So I joined my mom in that back in 2000. My mom's actually a trainer of NLP. So I'm a master practitioner of NLP, certified master practitioner. So that's how it all began, is basically because of my mom joining her in the family business. And then we work with corporations and individuals to help them achieve the success that they're wanting to achieve, but from the perspective of not just mindset. I mean, there's tools and skills and a whole bunch of learning that can go on with that.
For sure.
But that's where that background came from. So.
Excellent. So for the last 20 or so years, that's what you've been doing then, is the family business, coaching, working with corporations. And so I guess you really got to see some of the behind the scenes with a lot of these corporations and where this kind of mindset stuff, these tools can actually help. It's not just necessarily about selling more, but it's the mindset of selling more. It's the mind of sales and all these different things, correct?
Yeah, and it's really getting yourself out of your own way. So the one thing that I really did recognize in working with all of these different companies is that the people who are achieving success, like great levels of success, they really do care about getting out of their own way, figuring out what is it that's limiting them and being the best that they can be. So like the true leaders, they care about people, they care about communicating, they care about building relationships. And the only real way to do that is to work on yourself first, because if you're walking around with being negative or angry, frustrated, like in that mode of focusing on the negative and what's not working, you can't lead people to where you want to go. So that's the one thing that I really noticed across the board, is that anyone who's achieved that level of success, or most people, they pay attention to this aspect. They don't just pay attention to learning their skill.
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely. Now, so you've been working on that since 2000, and then you made a decision to get into real estate. And what spurred on that decision to kind of branch out and start doing something different?
Well, so Jason had a keen interest in real estate investing. I had no knowledge of it, no clue, no interest prior to him. So he's the one who kind of introduced me to it. We did a lot of talking about it, I didn't know much about it. We went to an acre event, which I'm assuming is where I met you.
Probably, yeah, I would assume so.
I don't remember that meeting, by the way.
I do. Oh, I do.
But yeah, so we joined RAIN, and that's where we really started to dive in. Having said that, at that point, I was still doing the corporate training and all of that, the coaching. And then we actually had a contract with an engineering firm that we had 3 years in a row. And at the end of December, we had another year coming up, which would have filled my entire calendar. And we found out on December 23rd, they got purchased by a company in Australia, and our contract was not carrying on for January 1st. So at that point, I took that as an opportunity. We've been talking about really diving into real estate, but hadn't, fully done so. So I decided to jump in full time at that point.
All right. So Jason was the one who kind of got things started, I guess, with the interest in it. Now, Jason actually has a background working in construction, correct? I mean, he does a lot of work with building envelope and different things like that, right?
That's right. He has a huge construction background. So he does have a company where they fix leaky condos. But even prior to that, the first house he bought in his 20s before we met was sinking into the ground. He lifted that up.
Wow.
He completely gutted and renovated the house he was living in when I met him. He's built our cabin, went up for a year and a half, and every weekend built our cabin. So he definitely is skilled in construction.
That's great. And that kind of is what spurred on your first real push into real estate. Now, when we got started, it was a mix of what can we do to combine that expertise that Jason has in terms of the renovations and being able to add value, and what you can do in terms of running numbers, looking at the properties, helping your, with the design ideas and things. And that kind of spurred you guys on to starting to do flips as your initial kind of foray into real estate. And from there, we looked at a couple of houses together, I remember that, but we ended up settling on doing condos and townhouses pretty heavy through like 2016, 17, a bit into 18 as well.
Yeah. So we actually did one house prior to meeting you that took us 9 months to do. And so then we made the decision that seeing all of the things that could come up in doing in a full house and landscaping and roofs and just all that goes into a house, that's why we decided to focus our attention on townhouses and condos for the flipping. So
yeah, and with condos, townhouses, you don't have roof concerns, you don't have siding, windows. As long as you've scrutinized the strata and made sure that there's nothing big coming up, really, then it's a cosmetic play at that point. There's nothing.
You're in a lot more control of the timeline.
Absolutely. And for the most part, you don't have to really pull permits when you're doing anything like that either, because again, it's just replacing some cabinets, some flooring. There's no major ticket items being done in a condo. So it was able to, while you were doing this, you found that these were a much shorter time. The average time it took you to renovate a condo or townhouse was approximately how long?
I would say 2 to 3 months. I think we were typically in and out in 3 months, like
right.
Bought it, renoed it, listed it, sold it, closed, and on to
right.
that.
Yeah. And that started spurring on for you guys, because you guys kind of led that charge, I find, for a lot of the clients, because we've interviewed you in the past, and people got this awesome idea that flipping condos was great, and it really became a trend, and it was tough then to find inventory because the market was so hot. And in a lot of ways, we actually did very well, because by the time we had finished the reno and listed it, the market had even moved since then. So we're selling it higher than the original comps. So there was a big rush where things were going really, really well. But then obviously this strategy is definitely a market dependent strategy as well, because then things slowed right down and you weren't able to get the comp price that you were looking for. Or if you had bought something with maybe more restrictions, it was harder to sell. So I know for the most part, we did very, very well, but at the same time, you were still caught in a situation similar to that at one point. I believe it was in Nanaimo.
That's right. So at the very end. So thankfully, we rode the wave really well. Like we couldn't have timed it more beautifully when we got
a ton of flips.
Run. It was awesome.
Yeah.
And it was perfect timing in every sense of it, in the market, in the time that I could give it and everything. We actually had decided to stop focusing on flips, thankfully, before the market took that turn. So we already knew we weren't going to continue down that path, simply because Jason had a day job and then was
Yep.
doing, every evening and weekend. So from a lifestyle perspective, it wasn't meeting what we were wanting to accomplish moving forward. But we did end up having that one in Nanaimo that took longer. I mean, we didn't lose money on it, but we definitely would have just broke even. Like, we did not make money because we took a while to sell it.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, when the market slowed down, it made it very difficult to sell, and especially if there was restrictions.
And
right?
that was had a restriction. So that was another learning. So we got a little bit cheeky in the flips when the market was hot, and
Everything sold. Everything sold back then.
Like, we started with all of these only if they're allowed rentals, and nothing with age restrictions, and nothing, we started with a plan of being really, really super careful. And then as things went on and everything was so hot and going, we loosened that a little bit. And Nanaimo was an example of that. We loosened that. There was an age restriction. It was the last one that we did. The timing was, we were right at the end of that. We still weren't at the worst of it, but we were at the end of that. And so, it was the last one we did, and it wasn't the most successful one that we did, that's for sure.
Yeah, I mean, age restrictions are super tough to deal with, because I actually wrote an article over on Medium, if anyone wants to look that up, talking about the two bylaws that actually I find kill more deals than even rental restrictions, because there's a lot of people out there who aren't concerned if it allows rentals or not. They just want a nice home.
It's your primary residence.
It's your primary residence. They don't care if it allows rentals or not. And some of them actually prefer if they're not mixed in with tenants. But age restrictions and pet restrictions are two bylaws that kill some of the most deals, because so many people have pets nowadays. And they, in a lot of ways, I see it, people make their financial decisions almost based on their pets. I know so many people who are like, well, I can only afford this, but only if it can bring my dog, right? And I'm like, well, then you got to go further out to get that, right?
I would not be moving anywhere that I cannot bring my dog. I'm telling you.
Exactly. So, I mean, because the pets are family, right? And then the other big one is that age restriction. And in all honesty, most of the age restrictions are 55 plus. I've got a listing in a building that's 40 plus right now. You and I did a 19 plus building in New Westminster. I remember that one. Casa del Rey, I remember, because it was the funky Spanish building. But the 55 plus, when I go through those buildings, most of the residents are not 55 years old or like 60 years old. They're 80s and 90s, because they're original to the building. And most people in their 50s, they're still working, and they're still working hard for their money. And they don't want to move into a building that's based from the 70s and 80s that's not been maintained. Because I do find that a lot of people that are 80s and 90s year old, they're also heavy penny pinchers. And I think it's because of the generation they grew up in. A lot of them are Depression era, and they don't want to spend the money on the buildings. So someone who's 55 years old, they can afford, when they're downsizing, to go into a brand spanking new building.
Right.
They don't want to be in these. So to me, we should abolish 55 plus bylaws, because those will be great starter properties or great rental properties, right? And that'll help ease some of the concerns.
Well, and because this one in Nanaimo, oh my gosh, it was so beautiful. One of the reasons I thought the age restriction would be fine is because it was Nanaimo. So I thought a lot of retirees, there's a bigger retirement community there. And the other thing was, this had an incredible view of Departure Bay. It was the most stunning view with a pool. The building was like U-shaped with a pool in front. So your view from the unit was pool, then grass, then ocean. It was incredible. But the market is what the market is. And it, at that point, doesn't really matter how much Melanie loves it.
Yeah, that's exactly it. And then, the other thing, talking about flips, I've still got clients who are still doing flips. And we still bought a property that needed renovations recently, but the criteria have definitely tightened in terms of what you're buying, which then does limit the amount of inventory that you can find, because it goes back to what we did at the beginning, right? Has to allow rentals, has to allow pets, the big ticket items like roofs and balconies and plumbing, all that has to be done. But like, I've even added recently, for some of my clients, the curb appeal and the lobbies and stuff have to look nice. Like, if you feel like you're going to get stabbed while you're walking through the hallway, and then you get into a nice, beautiful unit, and then you leave again and you still have that stabbing feeling, your first and your last impression are going to be the ugly hallways with the stained carpets and the holes in the wall. No matter how nice the unit is, you can't get them to that unit without getting them through that hallway. So that's another thing that I've noticed has definitely held back sales as the market had slowed down. So now it's like these extra things. When you're walking through, you really got to scrutinize the look of the building even, because people want to imagine liking where they live and inviting their friends over.
Yeah.
So it's definitely made it tougher, but there's still opportunities out there for people who are doing it. You just have to be very cautious and not take everything that looks like it needs reno, right?
Right, like we were doing. I mean, at that time, you're making me think of that one in Abbotsford on, I think it was on Fern Street. But anyway,
Fern, yeah.
I didn't even want to go into the underground, you know? Yeah, the unit was gorgeous, but
anyway. Yeah. And again, examples of different market timing, right? The market was great back then to sell those types. And if we see that going that direction again, maybe it'll open up. But for now, you got to be, careful, and you have to have a plan B. Yeah. Right. You have to, if it hasn't sold in X number of months, you got to put a tenant in there. Yeah. And I think too many investors get hung up. I've had a few people who've done this where they say, well, I'm a flipper and I didn't imagine having this as a rental property. But as an investor, you're a flipper, you're a landlord, you're everything. It's whatever is your next strategy to maximize the return on that property. Right.
Well, I think the market tells you what your strategy at the time needs to be. Right?
I agree.
If you're an investor, then you look at the market and you decide what strategy makes the most sense right now.
Absolutely. I totally agree with that. And again, if you try one strategy and you run out on your timeline, then you need to be flexible and move quickly, again, to mitigate loss and maximize return, right?
Yeah.
So, okay. So moving forward then, I want to really dive back into that mindset stuff, because you recently were introduced to a group called Fearless, which, you jumped in because you wanted to learn more about real estate. You wanted to expand what you're doing. You wanted to really take this as more of a career. And part of that was learning how to raise capital, because for the most part, all these flips we were doing was with your own capital or with family capital, correct?
That's right. Yeah.
So knowing that eventually does tap out, and you want to build now a portfolio that doesn't include just flips, but you're now looking at longer term holds. You're looking at longer term wealth and cash flow. You had to learn what it's going to take to raise capital from others. So you joined Fearless, and within a short matter of time, you started becoming a speaker on Fearless, which I thought was amazing. So tell us a little bit about what you do for the community members in Fearless.
So I have been invited by Corey and Tiffany, and I was thinking about it earlier. I have no idea how that even really unfolded, because I've never personally met them. I'm obviously very aligned with them. I think they're amazing people, and I love the fact that they care about the human side of things. So there was a connection that way, how to build my business, how to create joint venture partnerships, and be a good human at the same time. So there was this connection. But yeah, they invited me to do what we've called Mind Power Mondays with Melanie.
And very what's alliterate or alliteration, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Very clever, isn't it?
I think so. Just like the Manning Up on Real Estate podcast.
There you go. That's why we like each other, Cameron.
There you go.
So they invited me to do that in January. We originally started off that it would be sort of a 4-week run, and here we are at the middle or end of April, and I'm still doing them every Monday. So really the idea, and it's evolved over time, is just that
like anything does, right? Yeah.
That's right. So I share mind power tips. So mindset, mind power. I look at the brain sort of as a muscle that you're exercising, just like anything else. And if you want to create success and you want to really do what the people who achieve excellence do, you've got to make it a focus, and you've got to exercise it and train yourself to think differently, train yourself to have different strategies that will allow you to achieve that success, overcome obstacles, all of those things. So
right. So if you don't mind, maybe you can give us a little bit of a teaser as to some of the topics that you've talked about on some of these Mind Power, like, maybe a quick couple-minute overview of what people listening to this podcast right now could literally implement right after turning this podcast off.
Yeah. So, I'll start with, in the beginning, it was really about building your success and teaching people about the mind, how it works. I'd say the one thing, if I were to stand on my soapbox, and what you can't stop me from talking about is the fact that
I think we got to mute you. No, I'm just kidding.
Ha ha ha. The most powerful thing that's super, super simple, that is the overlying premise of everything that I share and care about, is that what you're thinking about creates how you're feeling.
Right.
Bottom line. So People don't often like to take responsibility for that. If they're feeling frustrated, they're feeling angry, they're feeling overwhelmed or whatever, they want to think it's because this happened, that happened, this person said this, right? COVID, like whatever it might be, although this is a little bit different. But the reality is, if you're feeling crummy, whatever that crummy might look like at that moment, that's because you're thinking about something that actually causes your brain to release chemicals to your body. Whenever you have a thought, your brain releases chemicals to your body. Those chemicals fly through your body, they attach onto the receptor site, they create a physiological response, and that sends a message back up to your brain going, I'm angry, I'm frustrated, whatever it might be.
Yeah. So like you've been feeling frustrated, now you got body aches and things like that. And
that's right. And even before the body aches, it's the fact that you're creating that feeling of frustration by thinking about something.
Yeah, dwelling on it almost.
That's right. When something happens, it's normal to have a response. If you're in front of me and you say something to me and it hurts my feelings or ticks me off or whatever it might be.
Yeah.
In the moment, yeah, you feel something. But if I go home and I'm safe in my house and we're no longer together and now all of a sudden I'm feeling all fired up because of what Cameron said to me 3 hours ago, there's nothing actually happening right now.
Yeah.
But I'm feeling it and I'm creating that myself by thinking about it. So there's a true scientific physiological connection between your thoughts and how you feel.
Right.
And I think that that's the most empowering thing. If I could spread one message around the world, it's if people could start to acknowledge that, we'd realize we actually have control over it. And just as when we think about negative things, bad things that have happened to us, scary things that are going on in the world, when we think about them, we feel horrible. When we think about things that excite us, when we think about things that are, coming up in our future, or even great experiences that we've had in the past, when we think about those things, our brain releases different chemicals to our body that create a different feeling. And so if you move that out into, how does that help me in my success? Okay, well, that's great. I make myself feel angry or I make myself feel happy, big whoop. But how does that translate? That translates because when you're a business person and you've got to go out and build relationships with people and create a presence for yourself, create an image of who you are in this world, if you're holding on to crap from the past, that is spewing out to everybody that you meet. If you start to take control of that, and before you get out of your car when you're at a meeting, you take a minute to actually control where your thoughts are and create the presence that you want, so that when you walk out and you meet that person, you are who it is you want to be. And relay that message, that is going to change your interactions with people. That's going to change your results.
Significantly, for sure.
Yeah. So that's how it translates. Yes, this is all about, and it's great to feel good and feel happy. And that's a whole nother conversation, but I care a lot about that. But from a business perspective, you've got to be in control of your presence.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I totally agree with that, because again, if you are letting that stuff dwell, and like something that happened 3 days ago even, and you've got a meeting coming up and you're still dwelling on that, you're not going to go into that meeting. And especially as you're building a portfolio and you're meeting people who might invest with you, or if you're a realtor listening to this and you're going to your next listing appointment, or whatever the case might be, you're going into those meetings still bringing that energy from whatever's pissed you off. Well, it's going to translate into that conversation, and you're not going to bring your all and land that listing or land that money from that JV partner, because you're not going to be at your 100. But if you've got that right energy coming into those meetings, then you're going to shine. You're going to show who you truly are and why that person should work for you. So I 100% agree.
And here's the deal. Sorry to interrupt you, but here's the real deal. You can't hide it. So, people say like, fake it till you make it.
I hate that.
I know. Or like, they pay attention so much to the words that they're speaking. Yeah. But not to what's going on in their head. Because the other piece of that, when I talked about the chemicals getting released to your body and all that kind of stuff, the other piece of it is it shines through in your physiology. Yeah. Automatically. This is not something that you control.
Even just like you're just coming in, you might be hunched over a little 100%. Bit more, because again, that's the feeling that you have versus the open and
100%. So there's this connection that it's important for people who want to achieve that level of success. There's a connection that needs to be recognized.
For
What
sure.
you think about creates how you feel. How you feel creates how you present yourself. How you present yourself creates the results that you get in the world.
Yeah. Yeah, that's we've got a lot of training at Keller Williams that's very similar to that. Your thoughts become your things become actionable. Like there's a whole wheel, and it all goes back to thinking at the end of the day, right?
That's right.
So a lot of sales businesses all start with the training of the mindset before you go out and do the actual skills, right? So,
and I think the thing that I love so much about the NLP model, and at least hopefully the way I share it, is the reason why. Like, it's one thing to say you need to be positive, it's another thing to say that when whatever you're thinking about is actually causing your brain to release chemicals. There's scientific data to back it up. It's not just be positive.
Yeah.
It's control what you're thinking about, to control that internal environment, to control your presence, to achieve results. Like, it's, if somebody just tells you just be positive, it's like, well, that's great.
Thanks, tips.
Yeah, right? But if you understand the science behind it, you actually start to become a master of it. And that's where I say, like, your brain being a muscle. Start to play with it. Start to recognize, when I feel like this, what did I just think about? Oh, crap. Yeah. Wow, there really is a connection. And then purposefully choose your thoughts. If you're if you're not feeling great, if you think about a vacation you went on, or a sale you got, that, like, something you were on top of the world, if you think about that for a minute, you will feel different.
For sure. Yeah. And I like what you said there, like the brain being a muscle, right? You don't expect to have big biceps and you're not doing the reps, right?
That's right.
So building that muscle, your brain, you're going out of your way to think those thoughts and change the direction. And it's a very, what's the word I'm looking for? Like, it's definitely an exercise that you have to do, right?
It's like, at any given moment, I look at it, and I know nobody else can see me because it's a podcast, but you can. I look at it like this. You've got two directions you can look. And everybody has stuff going, this time aside, just regular life and now, we always have challenging things going on, and we always have good things going on. Mm-hmm. Sometimes the good things might be little and the challenges might be big, but you always have both. And it literally is a choice which direction you're going to look. And you might find yourself looking over here to the challenges. But the minute you do, where the training comes in, where that bicep curl comes in, is that the minute you recognize that you're focusing over here and you want to feel different, you literally get yourself to focus over here and you change what you're thinking about. And you might go back to the challenge, and then you bring yourself back over to, like, you've got to play with it, practice it, commit to yourself that you're going to change it. And then you'll start to see the power that it has.
So speaking about, like, a small exercise, what is something really simple that someone can do if they're kind of going down that path that we talked, they're looking that direction of the challenges and the negativity? What's one small exercise that you would recommend they do? Is it just thinking about something positive, or is there something they can really focus on doing to change that direction?
Well, what I recommend people do is have what is called, like, your thought toolbox, or, you can have several of them, or have one, but that, when I think about this, I feel good. So the problem is, when we're in a problem state, when we're focused on challenges, when we're feeling down, it's not very easy for us to access something good, because we're in a funk. That's why we're needing to change it, right? Yeah. If we have kind of like a go-to thought, something that in advance we've decided is our thing, when we need to, this is what we're going to think about in order to change the chemistry that is going on, thinking of it scientifically, then when you're feeling bad, when you're going down that rabbit hole, you literally stop, close your eyes, think about that thought, whatever it is. And what you want to do too is you got to make it real. So in order to get your brain to release chemicals, it's not just thinking about, like, oh, I love surfing, I love being behind the boat. It's like, I'm imagining myself in the water. I'm imagining myself on the board. I'm imagining the wind. That wave. That's right. I'm imagining the wind. I'm imagining the tunes cranked. I'm imagining my family. Like, I'm imagining it all. And at some point in that imagination, in bringing all of those details in, all of your senses, at some point, you get a feeling. Yeah. And that's when your brain has released those chemicals to your body. Yeah. So that's, it's a really easy tip, but the important thing is to have, like, your go-to thought in advance.
Right. So again, if while you guys are, practicing these methods, maybe have it written down, keep it with you, throw it in your wallet, throw it in your purse so that you can even pull it out to remind you what that thought is
Yeah.
that's giving you that feeling, right? Because it's starting small and building those steps and getting connected with people such as Melanie who can help build that. If you're a member of Fearless, join in on the Mind Power Monday. If you're not a member of Fearless, send me a DM and I can definitely get you in touch with those guys. Definitely did that for Melanie.
Yeah, it's all thanks to you, Cameron.
Well, I don't know if we should share it on the podcast, but why not? What's the saying that Melanie has now?
Oh gosh, is it always ask Cameron or go ask Cameron?
Yeah, always ask Cam.
Yeah, always ask Cameron. Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, we definitely we can put you in touch so that way you can kind of catch some of those Mind Power Mondays, and it's free to join the group, and then you get that access to be able to learn and see more of that stuff. Because and kind of tying it back in, we've talked a lot about mindset from an investment and a business owner perspective, but now more than ever during COVID-19, your mindset is key because a lot of people out there, it's a super negative situation. And that's kind of why I wanted to bring in this Corona Chronicles idea, is so we can provide people some new ideas, whether it's mindset, strategies, anything else that gets them out of the funk of just sitting at home. And I think now more than ever, this is super relevant because a lot of people have, lost their job or they are not able to work. And obviously it's going to be a very depressing situation, right? So having that mindset of being in that depressed situation, when this is all over, you're not going to be able to get back into the flow as quickly than if you've taken that time to learn a new skill, learn a new investment strategy, and at the same time continue to work on that mindset and keep it in that positive frame that this is a time of opportunity. It's not a time of despair. This is where I think really comes into relation. That's really why I did want you on this podcast. Because I think now more than ever, you need to focus on this, right?
I mean, obviously I agree with that because this is my thing. But I mean, I really feel that you're bang on. And I appreciate what you just said, because another big piece of it that I think is really important is this is scary. This is not sugarcoating this and pretending that we live in la la land and that everything is rainbows and butterflies. Not in the slightest. This is scary for people. People are living in fear, feeling overwhelmed, not knowing how to work at home, working with their children at home, potentially some people in their family being either ill or having to go to work and expose them. I mean, there are money, tenants paying or not paying. I mean, the list goes on and on. So I am not naive enough to stand here and say that this isn't scary and that this isn't stressful. It is. And it's okay that people are feeling this way. That's normal. It wouldn't be normal to go through this like la la la, that just would not be a normal human experience. The key is that this is all very real. It is scary. And you either curl up in a ball on your couch and cry and worry the day away, or you do what you can to feel as good as you can feel in amongst the reality that exists right now.
Exactly.
And that's where I come in. It's like, okay, this is happening. We have no control over it. There is one thing that we have control over.
Yeah.
Always. And that's now and always. It's our mind. That is the only thing that we have control over. We don't have the control over what the government does, what our spouses do, what any of it. We don't have control ever over any of that. Yeah. We only can control the way we respond to what's going on around us.
Yeah. And that is the key difference between who's going to come out of this situation stronger and has built something for themselves, and those who've let the situation take control and then they're struggling afterwards. And unfortunately, it's the real reality we look at even when we look diving back into the real estate side of things. It is going to affect the market. It's going to affect things. We are going to see a recession. It's unavoidable at this point. But how deep this recession goes is how people respond to it. Are they going to find ways to get back to work as soon as possible? Or are they going to let the situation go where they can't afford their property? And I think there's going to be some great opportunities for those who've got the right mindset, who can then take advantage of the market, and the most millionaires are always made in recessionary times. But again, coming out of it, if you're listening to this podcast, start building that mindset, start building that frame of reference so that you come out of the gate strong and are able to take advantage and not set yourself behind, right? And yeah, there's going to be a ton of things we can't control. We've talked about it a lot, both on the podcast, on different events that we've hosted, about going and getting those mortgage deferrals, doing what you can, being proactive in this time to do what you can to COVID-proof your portfolio and COVID-proof your finances. And there's going to be things you can't control, right? There's going to be effects on your finances. And
you have to be in a resourceful state in order to come up with solution.
Absolutely.
So when you're in a state of panic, worry, stress, overwhelm, you can't see from the same vantage point.
Yep.
So you can't come up with solutions. You can't be creative and figure out and problem solve and be proactive when you're in that state of chaos. So you need tools to be able to get yourself to a state of calm, to the point that you can then critique, look, analyze, and figure out, what do I need to do next? But you cannot do that when you're in chaos.
Yeah. And again, I really appreciate you being on here, because I think this is super relevant to right now. And I think it's super relevant whether we're in a situation like this or not. But I think more than ever, the mindset is going to be key to get people through this. So I do appreciate you taking the time to join us. Now, we do have a recurring segment, and I'm sure you've heard the podcast before, but I always like to ask for a book recommendation. What are you either reading today, or what has been a very impactful book that you would recommend to listeners to look up, read, listen to, whatever, that you feel will have a significant impact on their investing career, their mindset, whatever you feel is relevant to this talk?
Wow. Well, I should have known that. I should have listened to your podcasts before. I don't know that I have. Yeah, exactly. Well, I have, maybe just not in its entirety. But I honestly don't know that I have a specific book that I would recommend people read. I would say, because everybody's drawn to different things. I mean, I love people like Brene Brown. This is completely not business minded, but I'm completely infatuated with Oprah.
But Oprah's got a lot of business related stuff too in her books. So
yeah, I mean, I turn more to sort of inspirational women myself, but that's not going to be applicable to all of your listeners. NLP, neuro-linguistic programming, there are a lot of books. Tony Robbins is actually NLP based, although he's very out there and has taken the model and made it a lot bigger and a lot more raw than how I utilize it. But I would say, honestly, from a mind power, understanding the brain and those chemicals, to look up any books in NLP. And I can even share with you after, like, go to my library and look at what books might be a good start.
For sure.
But the model itself is incredible. It was created by some people who really, it started because they wanted to look at what makes the difference between people who are excellent at what they do and the rest of us who are sort of mediocre. And then they analyzed, okay, so what strategies are they running? What are they thinking about when they do what they do? How do they actually do that from a mental perspective? Yeah. And that's how this model was born. So it's a fascinating model. And I would say reading anything that can educate yourself a little bit on the power of the brain is, it just helps. It helps make life more enjoyable. It creates your success, but it also makes you enjoy life in the moment when you understand that power that you have.
Right. So, maybe shoot me a text with a couple titles. I'll throw them in the show notes for everyone who's listening. You can take a look at them in the show notes. And again, I want to make sure I respect your time here, but I know you and I could chat for hours on this.
I know.
But what are a couple things I want to just quickly share? So we've talked a lot about what you've done. What are you working on right now? What are some things you're doing right now for your own portfolio as this continues to go?
So at the moment, as you know, we are working on a reno in Abbotsford. It's for a long-term buy and hold. We're doing a BRRRR strategy with joint venture partners. Mm-hmm. So we're in the process of the renovation there. It's slow go right now. We're just slowly moving along. We also are working on building a fourplex over in Nanaimo. We are in the development permit stage for that. So that's in the works as we speak. And really what my focus right now is getting long-term buy and holds with joint venture partners. So the thing that I'm super excited about, that's where the Fearless group came huge into play, is I want to partner with people who are excited about investing in real estate, but they don't know how. They may not have the time, the money, or the expertise to do it, but they already know the power of real estate. I'm not here to convince people of that. But
everyone in the Lower Mainland has seen what our market's done for the last 30 years.
That's right. So it's like, you know, if somebody's working full time or they have no desire to figure out where, how, what to buy and how to do that, I want to partner with them, because part of the fulfillment for me is in being able to make a difference in people's lives. So that's how I was able to merge the real estate and what I care most about, helping people, into this joint venture focus. So now I can.
In a way, that was almost a shift in your mindset as well.
Oh my gosh, that was a huge shift in my mindset. And again, that was in thanks to you introducing me to Corey and Tiffany and the Fearless Group, because they were separate worlds to me. It was like either I was in real estate or I was going to go make a career helping people, but I didn't somehow see how I could do both. And now it's like, how did I not see that? I can partner with people. I can find the properties. I can manage the properties. If they have the access to the financial resources and can qualify, I can make people money. I can help people achieve the results that they want in their life and the goals and the retirement and that legacy and all that, while they go do what they love and I get to do what I love. I mean, so that's really where my focus is right now.
That's awesome. That's awesome. All right. Well, we're going to let listeners kind of get on with their day here. I do thank everyone for joining us and listening. I do really appreciate, Melanie, you being on here again, because I think more than ever, the mindset is something people really need to focus on. And then again, building that muscle, as she said, will help you after this whole COVID is long behind us to continue to be in that frame of mind for long-term success. So Melanie, just for the people to be able to get in touch with you, if they've got any questions or maybe they've got some joint venture opportunities for you or anything like that, what's the best way someone can get in touch with you?
I would say email is probably the best way at this point. I mean, I am on Facebook. It's Melanie Robinson. And my email, do you want me to just give it now?
No, sure.
It's irvineventures@hotmail.com. That's probably, the best way to get me.
Irvine Ventures. And I know you've got a website coming out soon as well.
I do. Actually, I just emailed about it again today. So it is not up and running yet, but it is in the works.
So if you guys connect with her, or if you want to send me a link on any one of my socials, then I can get you in touch with Melanie as well. Between the Mind Power stuff, if you're looking for access to Fearless, I can definitely put you in touch there. And again, if you want to interact more with this podcast, you can always get in touch with me. I'm using the hashtag ManningUpRE on both Twitter and Instagram. More than happy to answer any questions that you guys have. As well as if you want more content, you can always go to YouTube, youtube.com/Cameron Manning, and continue to grow as an investor. Take this time during COVID-19 to really build your skills, build your mindset, and take advantage of the market, because we're going to see one of our best buying opportunities that we've seen probably since 2008 and 2009. So be prepared for it and be prepared to take advantage. Melanie, again, thank you so much for being on the podcast. Truly appreciated it. And hopefully when all this is done, we can get together for a coffee again soon. Or maybe a glass of wine.
Yeah, that'd be awesome. Thank you so much for having me, Cameron. It was awesome.
You're very welcome. We'll talk to you soon.
Okay.
Hey now, hey now, hey now, hey now, hey now. What you gonna do with your life?